The Alabama Booksmith presents Author Spotlight. Because every book in our store is signed, our wall of fame displays a breathtaking array of writers and signatures. Close-up shots reveal giants of literature, acclaimed historians, stars of stage and screen, our nation's leaders, famous sports heroes, and thousands of other esteemed authors. Today's Wall of Fame guest is John Chick Donohue, who will discuss his new book, The Greatest Beer Run Ever. And here is Chick Donohue with our host, Jake Reese.
Okay, Chicky Donohue, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank God. And you,
Well,
Jay, how are you doing?
oh, thanks so much. We have been so looking forward to this chat. And I got to say, man, your adventure tops in our mind Homer's Odyssey or Hannibal in the Alps, Marco Polo, Christopher Columbus, or even Neil Armstrong taking one giant step. And before we start, I want to assure the audience that this whole amazing story is 100% true. Um, Let me set the stage. Going back in a time capsule to 1967, neighborhood bars were the center of the universe. And Doc Fiddler's Bar was located at 275 Sherman Avenue in Inwood on the northern tip of Manhattan. And Colonel George Lynch was the bartender holding down the fort. And his issue on one fateful night was the terrible tragedy of 28 neighborhood boys killed in Vietnam and the disrespect showed by the protesters for their loss. And as the gang got behind him, uh, he wanted to let the guys still fighting over there know that Inwood supported them. And he decided the thing to do was to go to Vietnam and bring the boys each a bottle of beer. And he would get a list of who was serving and exactly where they were stationed and make a personal delivery. The only problem was he couldn't get on a ship without a seaman's card. And so the colonel asked a friend in the crowd to loan him his card. The friend was John Donohue, known to one and all as Chick or Chicky. And this neighborhood standout was a 4-year veteran of the United States Marine Corps. And when the fighting broke out in Vietnam, uh, Chicky went down to re-enlist and was turned down because he was too old at the ripe old age of 26. These days he was serving as a merchant mariner, and um, I've got a pic. Before we talk about the merchant mariner part, we've got an image of Chick when he was on active duty in the Marines, serving in Japan. And rumor has it that this truck was full of beer, but that's another story for another day. Um, Here is a picture of Chick's Union book from 1967. Well, okay, Chick, there's the introduction. Tell us why you didn't just loan the colonel your card.
Well, the card was needed to not only get on a ship, but you needed to be authorized by the Coast Guard for certain jobs. And my job was in what they call a black gang. I was a fireman, water tender, oiler. And George wouldn't know anything about that job. He was a great bartender, but I don't know how he could have made it as an oiler or a fireman. So, and my photograph was on it. It was like a driver's license. It wouldn't pass muster with George. So I couldn't give it to him. It was just out of the question. I mean, I could give it to him, but he wouldn't get on the subway with it. Forget about getting on a ship to Vietnam.
So that night, with everybody chatting about supporting the guys in Vietnam, you made the decision, heck, I'll do it. So tell us about that as you made that decision that you were going to go.
Well, I agreed with George on the fact that the guys over there needed a pat in the back and needed an uplift. And I knew, well, they would always like a beer. And so I was able to do it. I knew that with a little bit of luck, if I went down to the Union Hall, there would be, I could find a ship that would go out that part of the world. And it was just the right thing to do. I was single at the time, and I had no on the beach job. That was my job at the time as a mariner. So that's I decided to take a shot at it. The chances of me accomplishing any kind of success was probably 50-50, but it was worth the try. Besides, George was very liberal with pouring me the beer.
I think those odds would, I don't know if I bet 50-50. I think you're being generous. Okay, so now you're good to go. You've got the names of the boys in the neighborhood and the units where they're serving. You got a case of beer. You're wearing your Madras shirt on your back, and we've got a picture of Chick all dressed up for an ocean cruise. So, Chick, do you have a change of clothes or a plan or official contacts or even a way to reach land, since the ship's full of munitions and will anchor offshore? Take us on the first part of the voyage aboard the SS Drake Victory up to dropping anchor in the Kunan Harbor.
Well, I had never heard of the Drake Victory. I knew what a Victory ship was, and they were all World War II ships that were taken out of mothball. To the Union Hall a day or two later, I had the list, as you said, and the only addresses I had was the APO San Francisco, or the Army Post Office San Francisco, or the Fleet Post Office San Francisco, where the mail went to the guys overseas. They didn't have the name of the town they were in or anything like that. You had to figure that out when you got over there. So I saw on the shipping board, a big blackboard in the front of the Union Hall and inside, and it had listed, the first ship listed was the Drake Victory, and it had a check there where they needed an oiler. I was a qualified oiler, and then it had pierhead. That's why it was the first thing up there. Pierhead meant that it was leaving that day. It was at the pier, and it was heading out. So that's the first thing they call. They call that first, and I went up and I threw that card in that showed how long I had been on the beach, which gave me seniority. So that job was my job to claim. But one thing about that ship was, well, two things. One thing I knew with the ammunition, it wasn't going to go into any ports other than the canal, Panama Canal, and then Vietnam. Nobody would want that ship in their harbor with all the bombs on it. Went through the canal. They get you through quick. They don't even want you hanging around to get in the canal. And then I think it was 30 days or 31 days after we left the Pacific side of the canal, we landed in Quinnon. There was a rumor a couple of days before somebody saw trees off the bow or something. I never saw the trees, but first tree I saw was Quinnon, South Vietnam.
So now the rest of the mission is a piece of cake. All you've got to do is find Tommy Collins and Rick Duggan and Kevin Clune and Bobby Pappas fighting somewhere in Vietnam, pat them on the back, tell them everybody back in Inwood is proud of them, give them a beer, and make your way back to the good old USA in the middle of a terrible war. What is your first step, Chick?
Well, my first step is to recognize that I could get delayed. I wasn't able to go out, and like I had 12 hours in between ships, and so I needed to get a couple of days off. Almost impossible to do under those circumstances. But my pre-preparation as being a ship's chairman and having worked some shifts for the other oilers on the ship allowed me to tell the captain that I gave him a sob story about my stepbrother, and we lost mom, and I promised her before she left that I would find him and all of that. And I worked my shifts, blah, 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 blah. And all he cared about was the shifts were covered. So he gave me, I think, 2 or 3 days. At the most, I had 3 days to get back. I figured, well, if I was going to be successful, it was going to be, I wasn't going to hang around there long. I'd try it for 3 days. And if I got some people, fine. If I got nobody, well, I tried my best. So he said, go ahead. So now I had 3 days, and I was going off the ship and waiting for a launch to come. We were at anchor in the harbor, and on the launch, before the taxi launch, was a bunch of MPs in a boat, and they and I saw on their helmets they had the 127th whatever, the number of their battalion or company or whatever. And I asked them, and I looked at my list, and the first guy on the list was Collins, and he supposedly was in that company or battalion. So when they were coming up the gangway, I asked them, I said, hey, tell me, you guys know Tommy Collins from New York? And they said, oh, yeah, we know Tommy. I said, no kidding. I said, is he here in Quinnon? Quinnon. They said, he's right over there on that ship. He's just coming off watch. We're going to go pick him up after we drop off these guys. So I couldn't. That was the first. I wasn't in the country an hour or two. And at least I located. I didn't see him yet. So I stayed on that launch and went over to the next ship and walking up the gangway. And I saw him. He was looking over the side, waiting to be relieved so he can go to town and have a beer. I said, hey, Collins. Chicky, Donohue, what the heck are you doing here? So I said, the guy sent me over to buy you a beer. And we just slapped each other on the back. It was great. And I told him about his Irish mother, who told me that she goes to mass every morning praying for him and all of that. And it was a great time. And we went back to his barracks, and they got rid of all their gear. And then we went into Quinnon, to the town. It was right next to it. And we went to a local pub that catered to GIs. And we were in there drinking beer. And he said, what are you doing? So I showed him the list of guys. And he right away pointed at one of them. I think it was Joe McFadden. He said, "No, they shipped him back home. He had malaria real bad. You ain't going to find him." And so the next guy after on that list was a guy by the name of Dugan. So I said, "Do you know where Dugan is?" He says, "Yeah, he's up in Ankh. It's up in the Highlands." So I said, "Oh God, how am I going to get there?" He says, "So, every once in a while I have flights down, the First Airborne. No, it was the First Air Cavalry. They had their own planes. They had their own helicopters. It was an air outfit. And at the same time, in the bar was a big, tall Texan. He must have been about 6'4", 6'4", 6'5". Had a cowboy hat on, and he had a big first cab patch on his shoulder. And it was a very recognizable patch. It had a horse's head. It was like a black background with a yellow background with a black stripe down through it. And so I got talking to him. I said, "Hey, how you doing, Tex?" He says, "I'm doing great." He says, so he joined our party, and he says, "So what are you doing?" I said, "I'm over here seeing this, seeing my buddies." And I said, "As a matter of fact, the next guy on my list is in the First Air Cav. Do you know Charlie Company, or maybe the second, whatever?" And he says, "Yeah, sure, I know Charlie Company." I said, "Well, that's where I got to go." He says, "How are you going to get there?" I said, "I have no idea how I'm going to get there." So he says, "Well, I'll tell you what. You be on that tarmac tomorrow morning at 0800, and I'll bring you up in my plane." And he was what they call a chief, air chief, a plane chief. And he had I think the name of the plane was like an Albatross. It was like a twin engine. If it had 4 engines, it would have been like, I forget the name of the other one. Anyway, so we drank all night, sang a lot of Irish songs, had a great time. Next morning, Collins got me over to the tarmac, 0800, and there was Tex. And he sees me, and he says, "All right, New York, come on, get on the plane." So that was it.
What an amazing story. And you ended up pulling the same sort of stunt throughout the country of Vietnam and finding your guys and buying them beer, and few little mishaps along the way. Your ship sails, and the most outrageous, you get caught in Saigon in the Tet offensive. That makes that a story within the story. Recap, if you will, Chick, the catch-22 of trying to get back home, and what in the world you had to go through to get a Vietnam passport, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, when I finally got back to the ship, which was, well, I guess it was more than 3 days, the ship had sailed. So I had to go to the port captain, and he said, "What's your name?" And I showed him my ID and all. "Okay, well, they had you down as missing." So I said, "Oh God, my family's going to get a notice that I'm missing in Vietnam." I knew that wouldn't be, well, maybe it would have been treated well. Anyway, he says, "All right, this is what we got to do." And he gave me a whole bunch of stuff. I had to go to a barracks. They were going to give me a bed, and I was going to fill out this paperwork, and they were going to send it to Saigon, and Saigon would send the paperwork back up. And there was no computers then to speak of. And that was going to take like a week. And I'm still thinking maybe I can catch my ship. It would probably stop in the Philippines to refuel. So I said, "Why don't I just go down to Saigon and I'll do all the paperwork down there instead of hanging around here?" And he says, you can't do that." I said, "Why not?" He says, you can't travel anywhere in Vietnam without orders. They're not going to let you on no plane without orders. So I couldn't tell the guy, but I was thinking, I'd just been on a number of helicopters, a couple of different planes, and all in the last couple of days. It worked out so far. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll go down to Saigon, and when they send you the paperwork, I'll be waiting. I'll be down there. He said, he laughed at me and he says, here's the ticket for the barracks. Go over there. So I went out to the airport. I went to Collins. Collins got me back out to the airport. So I had a couple of MPs with me and a Jeep, like I was on some kind of official duty. And I went into a tent, and the fellow said, yes, sir, what, can I help you? I says, yeah. I said, you got something going south to Saigon? Yes, sir. I said, well, put my name down on the manifest there. And he said, where are your orders, sir? I said, I don't have any orders. What's your rank? I said, I'm a civilian. And I had the MP standing behind me, like, give him what he needs or something. They didn't say nothing. They just stood there. So he said, wait outside. So I waited outside, and a guy came by, and he was kind of old for Vietnam. He must have been in maybe his 40s. And he was definitely a pilot of some kind. And he had like some paperwork. And he went into that tent and come back out. So I said, excuse me, sir. I said, are you going south to Saigon? He looked at me and he said, who are you? So I figured I had to tell this guy the truth. So I told him the truth. I'm down on, not the whole truth. I said, my ship is down there and it's going to sail later tonight, and I got to get down there. What are you doing up here? I said, well, I gave him the story about the stepmother and my stepbrother he was up in Quang Tri, and I got up to see him, and the guy's looking at me, and I was filthy by this time. I was 3 or 4 days laying in the mud. And he says, gee, wow. He said, I'll tell you what, see that plane? I'm going to get in that plane. And if we can do something, I'll come to the door. You just keep watching that door. I'll give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down. If I give you the thumbs up, you come right then and there, jump in that plane. There's a seat just to your right as you come in the door, sitting there. Don't say anything to anybody. It was like a Beechcraft, a twin-engine Beechcraft. So I said, yes, sir. And he started walking away. Then he stopped and he said, I'll tell you something. If I wasn't a merchant seaman during World War II, I'd leave your rotten ass here. I took that as an endorsement. Thank you, sir. And the thumbs up, I jumped on the plane. It took off, and he took me to Saigon. I got off at the airport. I hitched a ride into the city, went to the American Embassy, and reported myself, who was still listed as missing. And started the bureaucratic process because I didn't have a passport at the time. All I had was that seaman's paper. As long as I stayed with my ship, I was fine. But if I'm not with the ship, I had to get a passport in order to travel. But on top of that, they could give me the passport. I could prove who I was. But I needed a visa to get out of Vietnam. And I'll never forget this part of it. They filled out paperwork. I filled out the paperwork. I took it over to like a motor vehicle bureau somewhere, and got online and gave them the paperwork and come back and we'll notify you. They were going to notify the embassy. So a few days later, the embassy notifies me. I had to check in every day, and maybe it was a week. And he said, okay, they're giving you a visa. You got to go over there tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock and you'll see Ding Nong Wang, whatever the guy's name was. And he says, you got to give him this paperwork and you got to give him some money. I said, I got to give him money? He says, yeah. So I figured maybe $20. They gave me like $20 or $30 a day to live on. So I said, how much do I got to give him? He says, well, in American dollars, it's approximately $900. said, $900. I don't have $900. And they said, no, don't worry about it. We'll give it to you. It'll be a loan. And so I said, oh, that's great. So I don't know if they didn't trust me that the next morning I showed up at the embassy. They had a guy, actually the consulate, which is part of the embassy. And they sent me over there with the $900 in an envelope with a guy from the consulate. And the guy from the consulate actually gave me the envelope when we got to this place. Like, he didn't want to give it to me before I would have went off on a party or something. And went into this guy's office. He stamped some papers, and he says, okay, is that for me? Yeah. I gave him the envelope. The nerve of him. He opened up the envelope and counted every dollar. I said, oh, my God, does he really think I came all this way to cheat him out of a couple of bucks? So that was it. Now I got a visa. Now I got to get a flight. I went back to the embassy, and they arranged for a flight. Took about another week or so. More important, to where to go. So they arranged for a flight to Manila. And at the same time, that's what really took the time, there was an American ship in there that was short a crew member, and I could qualify to do that job. And they would take me on as a crew member.
Pretty amazed. Not pretty amazed. It's the most amazing story I've ever heard. We left out a little bit that while you're in Saigon, you're in the middle of the Tet Offensive, and folks are getting killed all around you.
Well, actually, that was when the arrangements, when they finally came true, had me out on like an 8:00 flight from Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon, outside of Saigon, on like Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever the day was. It turned out to be January 30th.
Oh.
So I was in Saigon a couple of more days, maybe a week, and I showed up at the embassy real early in the morning. I was not going to miss that 8:00 flight, so I was there maybe 5:00, 4:30, 5:00, and it was just bedlam. When I got there, there was American troops outside, mostly MPs, some Marines, outside the embassy, firing into our embassy. That's the first thing I saw. There was nobody else in the streets of Saigon that morning. Nobody. But firing all over the place. And they had occupied the embassy. The Viet Cong, there were 19 of them in there. We didn't know that at the time. So I was there for hours until they finally killed them all. And I went into the embassy consulate and found that guy who was my go-to guy. And he gave me a check to go to a hotel. And the name of the hotel that I wanted to go to was the Palace Hotel. And I took the chit, and I'm going away from the embassy, and two Americans come out in civilian clothes. And I said, hey, any of you guys going to the Palace Hotel? They said, yeah, we're going to the Palace. I said, can I get a lift? Yeah, sure, jump in. So the guy says, do you have a weapon? I said, no, I don't have any weapon. He says, Frank, get a couple of 45s. So Frank went in, come out, gave me a weapon. He had a weapon. First guy already had a weapon. And they were clearly agents of the government, American government. I got in a Jeep, started heading to what I thought was going to be the Palace Hotel. They whipped right by Tudo Street where the Palace Hotel was. And by the time I got to talking to them again, we were in front of the presidential palace, and a Jeep about a block ahead of us got hit with a rocket and flew up in the air, and all hell broke loose. I spent the rest of that day and that night underneath the barricade and by myself, all by myself. I'll never forget it. It was the loneliest time in my life. And I didn't know anybody. Nobody knew me. For a while, I actually thought I died, and this was what I was raised to believe in, purgatory. That was the craziest part of it.
Mm, that's just absolutely amazing. I can't think of anything close to it, Chick. Um, After all of this, a few years back, you and your gang celebrated your 50th anniversary of the greatest beer run ever. And we're showing that picture on the screen of the picture you and your guys took. Could you recount who these guys were and where that picture was taken that's in the book?
I cannot see the picture that you're talking about. I have the book handy. Do you want me to look it up?
Get the book and
Okay, I'll get it. I'll
great.
get it. 1 second. Here it is.
Oh, super.
Do you know what page it's on?
Well, it's in the group of pictures. I'll just do it. That's just great. It was so impressive. It was taken at a school, and you had the guys that you had uh, been able to contact when you were in Vietnam. Uh, there it is. It's on the last page of pictures, so it would be uh,
Okay,
right next to
there it
one.
is. I see it.
Yeah.
I see it. Yeah, yeah. That's my. That's what I look like. That photo on the top. That was actually in the passport that was issued to me in Saigon, and
Hadn't
that's the
changed a
same.
bit. You hadn't
Hello?
changed a bit, Chick.
Not a bit. No, the same shirt, the same everything. Absolutely the same clothing I had on. That was my wardrobe. Uh, I found out later that I wasn't a big guy, but most of if you could buy clothes over there, they were for little people. They weren't for guys with look my size, and I'm not big, only 5'9". And the photo underneath was back in the old neighborhood, Inwood, in the local grade school where we all graduated from. And there was on the left was Rick Dugan. He was the guy from the 1st Air Cavalry up in Quang Tri, LZ Jane. And to his left was Tommy Collins, the MP in Quinnon. And that's me with the tie. And next to me on my left is Kevin McClune, Marine. I caught up with him. He was a radio guy. He fixed radios on the helicopters in Vietnam to help the enemy was able to pick up the helicopters by some kind of like a radar. And it came from the radios on the helicopters that sent out a signal. But he was able to squash that signal. So he was on just about every helicopter in the country. And then next to him is Bobby Pappas. Bobby was in the Long Bin ammunition dump. And he was actually the last guy I saw there. And it was after the Tet. And I saw him for a few days. His photo's in here in a couple of places. And I had him convinced the war was over, that the Tet attack was just to get everybody to the table so they would negotiate a peace. And after I left him, I went back down to Saigon. I was up in the Caravel Hotel at the rooftop bar, and the whole night blew up in Long Bin. That ammunition dump had been attacked and went boom, blown and blown. It was the biggest explosion I ever saw in my life. I just assumed Bobby was dead. The next morning I got in a convoy and it took me back up to Long Bin, and I went back into the middle of the base where Bobby worked in a bunker under the ground. He was the communications chief there. He was a sergeant. And he saw me and he says, "You told me this war was over?" He says, "Look at this place. Does this look like the war's over?" And they really got hit hard there. But the beautiful thing is, and you can see we're all smiling, happy, because we're all alive. and we're all together. I got a funny feeling after 50 years, we're all still here. What an amazing thing. You go, what are the odds of that? Forget about being in the war. I mean, the odds of four of your buddies being, five of us being together after 50 years, I don't know what they would be, but I wouldn't want them.
Well, the world is thankful for everything you've shared with us. We thank you for your service, for your incredible kindness to your fellow man, and for sharing this story, for taking time to visit with us today, and for signing that mountain of books for us, Chick.
Thank you. Quite welcome.
And thanks to all of you for watching. You will love owning a signed first edition of this remarkable book.